The Galactic Empire had always regarded Earth as little more than a backwater planet, an insignificant dot in the grand cosmic scale of their conquests. When they first encountered humanity, their disdain was immediate. Reports from scouts and diplomats mocked Earth's primitive state, noting its dense forests, unpredictable weather, and, most of all, its underdeveloped military. To the galactic commanders, Earth's wilderness was a joke, a mere obstacle to be cleared with advanced technology. As the Empire prepared its forces to land on Earth, their arrogance was palpable. In their minds, this campaign would be nothing more than a minor skirmish, a swift show of power. They viewed Earth's environment as something to be tamed, and humans as nothing more than a primitive species clinging to outdated methods of warfare. Galactic officers gathered around holographic maps of Earth's jungles, laughing at the idea of fighting in such a prehistoric setting. The galactic generals mocked the very idea of humans relying on nature for survival. "These jungles will be nothing but dust in hours," they boasted, their faith in their drones, plasma weapons, and armored machines unshaken. The dense canopy, the thick underbrush, the seemingly endless maze of trees, all these were deemed irrelevant. To them, nothing could stand against their technology. They saw the wilderness as an inconvenience, not an advantage. But on the other side of that wilderness, Earth's elite special forces were waiting. Trained in every possible environment, these soldiers had mastered the art of jungle warfare. They knew the terrain intimately, the way the jungle shifted and changed, how the ground underfoot could turn to quicksand, how the humidity could ruin even the most advanced technology. They had trained for this exact scenario, knowing that any invader unfamiliar with the environment would find themselves lost and vulnerable. These special forces weren't just soldiers. They were experts in survival, camouflage, and guerrilla warfare. Their equipment was simple compared to the galactic armies, but what they lacked in technology, they made up for in knowledge and experience. While the galactic forces relied on sensors and drones, Earth's special forces relied on instinct and centuries of human experience in warfare. For them, the jungle was not a barrier, it was an ally, a weapon to be wielded against any who dared enter. When the galactic army finally landed in the jungle, their overconfidence was immediately clear. Clad in shimmering armor, their machines cutting through the underbrush, they advanced without caution. Their drones hovered above, scanning for heat signatures, their soldiers marching in tight formations. But they were blind to the subtle movements within the trees, the quiet rustling of leaves, the faint flicker of shadows among the branches. Earth's forces watched in silence, hidden among the dense foliage. They knew their enemy was relying on technology, expecting a clear battlefield where every target was visible and easily destroyed. But the jungle was far from clear. It was a living, breathing entity, filled with dangers both natural and man-made. The galactic forces had no idea that they were walking into a trap. The first attack came swiftly, without warning. A galactic patrol, moving too far ahead of their main force, was suddenly engulfed in chaos. Hidden snipers took down key officers, while traps, simple yet effective, were triggered all around them. Explosions from hidden mines sent soldiers scattering in every direction, their formations broken. In the confusion, the jungle seemed to come alive, with shadows darting from tree to tree, unseen but always present. The galactic army, so reliant on their advanced equipment, struggled to adapt. Their sensors couldn't penetrate the thick canopy. Their drones malfunctioned in the humidity, unable to maintain their altitude. Even their soldiers, trained in open combat, found themselves disoriented and confused in the dense, unyielding jungle. The thick foliage blocked their vision, and every step forward felt like a step deeper into the unknown. Meanwhile, Earth's special forces moved like ghosts through the jungle. They struck and disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Their tactics were surgical, quick, efficient, and devastating. Every strike was calculated, designed to sow confusion and fear among the galactic ranks. The jungle itself seemed to be on their side, hiding them from sight, giving them the upper hand in every encounter. As the galactic commanders tried to regain control, their frustration grew. They had expected a swift victory, but what they faced instead was an enemy that refused to be seen, let alone defeated. The jungle, once mocked as primitive, had become their greatest enemy. It was as if the very earth beneath their feet was rebelling against them. The Galactic commanders, sitting in their high-tech command center far above the battlefield, began to realize the severity of their mistake. They had underestimated Earth, its people, and its environment. The jungle, which they had dismissed as irrelevant, had become the perfect weapon in the hands of Earth's special forces. The Galactic soldiers were not fighting humans alone, they were fighting the jungle itself, and they were losing. In the depths of the wilderness, Earth's forces continued to strike, each attack more devastating than the last. The Galactic Army, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves trapped in a war they didn't understand, against an enemy they couldn't see. The jungle had become their worst nightmare, and Earth's special forces were the ones controlling it. The Galactic commanders, growing increasingly frustrated, ordered their forces to press deeper into the jungle. They had lost a few patrols, but to them, it was a minor setback. Their technology would prevail, it always had. They believed that if they pushed hard enough, they could flush the humans out, crush their resistance, and end this battle swiftly. Yet they didn't realize that the deeper they went, the further they fell into a trap carefully laid by Earth's special forces. As the Galactic forces moved forward, their reliance on technology began to work against them. Their scanners, once so accurate, were now overwhelmed by the jungle's dense foliage and wildlife. Animals gave off heat signatures that confused their sensors. The humidity caused malfunctions in their equipment, making their drones lose power and their communications systems falter. They had no real visibility beyond a few meters, and every step forward felt like they were descending into the unknown. The jungle was swallowing them whole. The Galactic commanders refused to admit it, but the environment was beginning to control the battle. They had entered the jungle thinking they would overpower it with technology, but their soldiers were finding it harder and harder to maintain their formations. The jungle broke their lines, forcing them to spread out, making them vulnerable. Every sound seemed amplified, every rustling of leaves filled with potential threats. The Galactic soldiers were becoming paranoid, turning their weapons on shadows and branches, wasting precious energy and focus. Meanwhile, Earth's special forces continued to strike with precision. They didn't need advanced technology to know where their enemies were. Every broken branch, every displaced leaf told them what they needed to know. They moved like phantoms, silent and invisible, slipping through the jungle undetected. Their knowledge of the terrain was unparalleled. They knew where to step to avoid detection, where to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The Galactic forces were walking into their domain, and they were outmatched at every turn. The Galactic soldiers, trained in the open fields and skies of distant planets, found themselves completely out of their element. They were used to using brute force, relying on their overwhelming firepower and superior technology. But here, in the jungle, brute force was useless. Their heavy armor made it difficult to move through the dense undergrowth, their weapons too large to maneuver effectively in the tight spaces between trees and vines. They had no room to breathe, no room to fight. Earth's special forces exploited every weakness. They didn't engage in direct confrontations unless absolutely necessary. Instead, they attacked in small, coordinated strikes, disappearing before the Galactic soldiers had time to react. They used the jungle as a weapon, setting traps with vines and branches, leading their enemies into natural hazards like quicksand and animal dens. The Galactic forces, who had laughed at Earth's primitive ways, found themselves falling prey to the very environment they had mocked. Panic began to spread among the Galactic ranks. Soldiers whispered about being hunted, about never seeing their attackers. Morale was breaking down as the realization set in that they were not just fighting humans, they were fighting an environment they didn't understand, an enemy they couldn't see. The jungle, once deemed insignificant, had become a living, breathing threat, one that they couldn't control or conquer. Galactic commanders tried to adapt. They ordered more aggressive tactics, deploying heavier firepower and attempting to level sections of the jungle. But these efforts only made things worse. The more they disturbed the environment, the more unpredictable it became. Fallen trees created new obstacles, smoke from their bombardments obscured vision, and their energy reserves were depleting faster than expected. Their soldiers, exhausted and disoriented, began to realize that they were no longer in control. Earth's special forces capitalized on this chaos. They knew exactly when to strike, hitting the galactic forces at their most vulnerable moments. They targeted supply lines, cut off communication channels, and isolated small groups of soldiers. The Galactic Army, once united in its advance, found itself fragmented and vulnerable. Their advanced technology couldn't save them in this environment. It only made them more dependent on systems that were now failing. As the battle wore on, the Galactic commanders began to lose their composure. What had started as a show of force had turned into a nightmare. Every attempt to regain control was met with failure. The jungle, combined with the tactical brilliance of Earth's forces, had turned the tide of the battle. It was no longer a question of if they could defeat the humans, but whether they could even survive long enough to retreat. The Galactic commanders convened in a desperate attempt to come up with a new strategy. But their arrogance had cost them. They had underestimated their enemy, and now they were paying the price. The jungle, which they had dismissed as irrelevant, had become the deadliest opponent they had ever faced. And Earth's special forces, who they had believed to be primitive, had proven to be more than a match for their technological might. The Galactic soldiers, now scattered and leaderless, struggled to regroup. Their once advanced weapons and armor were failing them. The jungle had taken its toll, mentally and physically. Exhaustion, fear, and the constant threat of ambush left them in a state of disarray. The Galactic forces, who had entered the jungle with such confidence, were now desperate just to escape. But there was no escape. Earth's special forces had them surrounded, controlling every inch of the battlefield. The jungle itself seemed to close in on the Galactic soldiers, pressing them further into despair. The jungle had become their enemy, and they had no way to fight it. They were trapped in a war they hadn't prepared for, against an enemy they didn't understand, in a place they had underestimated. The Galactic commanders, for the first time, realized they had lost. The battle wasn't just about technology or firepower. It was about understanding the battlefield, and Earth's forces had mastered it completely. The jungle had become a weapon more powerful than any plasma gun or drone. It was nature, untamed and uncontrollable, and it had turned the tide of the war in Earth's favor. The Galactic forces, once mighty and unstoppable, had been humbled by a planet they had mocked. Earth's special forces had shown them that technology alone was not enough, that knowledge of the environment and the will to survive could overcome even the most advanced invaders. The Galactic commanders, now faced with the grim reality of their defeat, began to prepare for an inevitable retreat, knowing they had been beaten by forces far more powerful than they ever imagined. The Galactic forces, now deep in the heart of the jungle, found themselves not just fighting a losing battle but trapped in a relentless war of attrition. Every attempt to move forward was met with ambushes, every effort to retreat cut off by precise, calculated strikes. The special forces knew the jungle inside out, and they were now exploiting every weakness, every vulnerability in the Galactic ranks. What the Galactic commanders had once viewed as a primitive battlefield had become a maze of death, with their soldiers as prey. The Galactic Army's technology, once their greatest asset, was now a burden. Heavy machinery designed for open fields and urban combat was useless here. Drones failed to navigate the dense trees, becoming tangled or crashing into the thick canopy. Their armored vehicles, unable to maneuver through the uneven terrain, were left behind, abandoned and gutted for parts. Communications equipment, sophisticated but delicate, was rendered ineffective by the humidity, interference from the thick foliage, and Earth's forces disrupting their signals at every turn. Exhaustion began to set in among the Galactic soldiers. Weeks in the jungle, with no clear path to victory or retreat, had broken their spirits. They were far from their home worlds, surrounded by an environment they could neither understand nor predict. Their food supplies were dwindling, and the jungle's oppressive heat and humidity drained them of energy. The mental strain was even worse, knowing that at any moment, from any direction, Earth's forces could strike without warning. The special forces never let up. They had trained for this exact scenario, using the jungle not just as cover but as a weapon. They laid traps that targeted the Galactic Force's weaknesses, knowing how to make every attack count. They used the dense foliage to hide their movements, making it impossible for the Galactic soldiers to anticipate where the next strike would come from. The Special Forces didn't need to overpower the Galactic soldiers. They just needed to outlast them, to let the jungle wear them down until they were too tired and disoriented to fight back. The psychological toll was enormous. Galactic soldiers, once proud and confident in their superiority, now lived in constant fear. They no longer trusted their own technology, as it had failed them time and time again. Every rustle of leaves, every animal call in the distance, sent them into a state of panic. Paranoia spread like wildfire, with soldiers turning on each other, accusing one another of negligence or cowardice. Their command structure, once rigid and disciplined, was beginning to crumble under the pressure. Meanwhile, the Galactic commanders, who had once boasted of a swift and decisive victory, were now silent. They had underestimated Earth and its forces, and now, with their army crumbling, they were faced with the stark reality of defeat. Their attempts to call for reinforcements had failed, their communications severed. Even if reinforcements could arrive, there was no guarantee they could turn the tide. The jungle had become an insurmountable obstacle, and Earth's forces had proven themselves far more resourceful and resilient than the Galactic commanders had ever anticipated. Every attempt to regroup, to rally their forces for a counterattack, was met with failure. The Galactic soldiers, scattered and demoralized, could no longer fight as a cohesive unit. The jungle's terrain fragmented their forces, cutting them off from each other and leaving them vulnerable to Earth's hit-and-run tactics. Supply lines had been cut, leaving the soldiers low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Injuries from the relentless skirmishes, combined with infections from the jungle's harsh conditions, left many soldiers unable to continue the fight. In contrast, Earth's special forces remained a silent, unstoppable force. They had not suffered the same attrition. They moved through the jungle like shadows, striking when the moment was right and then disappearing into the foliage before the Galactic forces could retaliate. Their familiarity with the environment gave them a level of control that the Galactic soldiers could never achieve. Where the Galactic forces were overwhelmed by the jungle, Earth soldiers thrived in it. The Galactic commanders, realizing that further fighting would only lead to the complete destruction of their army, finally made the decision to retreat. But even retreat was no longer a simple task. The jungle had become a labyrinth, with no clear paths out. Their maps were useless, and their navigation systems had long since failed. Earth's forces had anticipated this move, and they were ready to intercept any attempt at withdrawal. The Galactic forces, already weakened and demoralized, found themselves facing the impossible task of escaping an enemy that seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere all at once. The retreat quickly turned into a rout. Galactic soldiers, desperate to escape, abandoned their posts and ran in any direction they thought might lead to safety. But the jungle offered no mercy. Earth's special forces, knowing the terrain and the enemy's state of mind, struck with precision, picking off stragglers and cutting off escape routes. What had started as an organized withdrawal turned into chaos, with Galactic soldiers fleeing for their lives, leaving behind their weapons, equipment, and even their wounded. The Galactic commanders, once proud and arrogant, were now reduced to mere survivors, just trying to make it out of the jungle alive. Their dreams of conquering Earth had turned to ash, and all that was left was the bitter taste of defeat. The jungle, which they had mocked, had proven to be their downfall. Earth's special forces, whom they had dismissed as primitive, had outmaneuvered, outthought, and outlasted them in every possible way. In the end, only a fraction of the Galactic army made it out of the jungle alive. Those who did were scarred, both physically and mentally, by their experience. They would return to their home worlds with tales of a planet they had once thought beneath them, a planet whose people had shown them the true meaning of resilience and warfare. Earth, with its primitive wilderness, had defeated one of the most advanced armies in the galaxy. The Galactic commanders, now disgraced, could only wonder how they had been so blind. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but they had underestimated the power of both the jungle and the human spirit. Earth's special forces had shown them that technology alone could not win a war, that understanding the battlefield, adapting to the environment, and having the will to survive were just as important, if not more so. And as the last of the galactic ships fled Earth's orbit, the jungle remained silent, as if it had never been touched by war. The special forces, having completed their mission, melted back into the wilderness, knowing that they had not just defended their planet, they had taught the galaxy a lesson it would not soon forget. The remnants of the galactic army limped away from Earth, defeated and broken, but the consequences of their failure reverberated far beyond the jungle. Word of the loss spread quickly through the Galactic Empire. A force that had never known true defeat had been humiliated by a planet they had deemed insignificant. The Empire, built on the foundation of its technological supremacy and unchallenged might, now faced a harsh truth: they were not invincible. Earth, a planet on the edge of their star maps, had exposed the cracks in their seemingly flawless armor. Back on Earth, the special forces quietly returned to their bases, blending back into the normalcy of their lives, their mission complete. There were no grand parades, no speeches. For them, this was just another successful operation, though one that had greater implications than any battle they had fought before. They had proven that Earth could defend itself, even against an enemy that outmatched them in every technological measure. The jungle, their silent ally, had done much of the work, but it was their training, adaptability, and understanding of warfare that had sealed the galactic army's fate. For the galactic commanders who survived, the return to the Empire was far from a hero's welcome. There was no denying the magnitude of their failure. They had underestimated not just Earth's special forces, but the power of an environment they didn't understand. Worse yet, they had overestimated the ability of their technology to solve every problem. It was a painful lesson in humility, one that the Empire's leadership would not forget anytime soon. In the halls of power, the Emperor himself demanded answers. How could such an advanced force be brought to its knees by what was considered an underdeveloped world? The explanations offered by the commanders were full of excuses: unexpected terrain, malfunctioning technology, a cunning enemy. But none of it changed the outcome. The Empire had been dealt a significant blow, and it had been broadcast to the entire galaxy. The defeat shook the confidence of many within the Empire. It wasn't just a military loss, it was a loss of prestige, of the unshakable belief that their technology made them superior to all others. Analysts began questioning whether the Empire's reliance on technology had made them complacent. They had stopped adapting, stopped innovating. Earth's victory, using tactics as old as warfare itself, had shattered the illusion that technology alone was the key to dominance. Earth, on the other hand, had gained something far more valuable than military success. It had gained time. The Galactic Empire, now licking its wounds, would not return soon. The loss had made them cautious, unwilling to risk another costly engagement. Earth's leaders knew this respite wouldn't last forever. The Empire would regroup, reanalyze, and eventually return, perhaps with an even greater force. But now, Earth had a crucial advantage: knowledge. Earth's military began analyzing every detail of the battle, dissecting the tactics used, the galactic army's weaknesses, and how they could be exploited further in the future. Special Forces commanders briefed world leaders on the importance of maintaining their edge in guerrilla warfare, the power of the environment, and how Earth could continue to hold its own against even more advanced threats. For the first time in modern history, Earth was no longer just a planet on the defensive. It had proven it could fight back, and win. But the victory was not just about tactics or technology. It was about human resilience, adaptability, and the will to survive. Earth had faced existential threats before, from its own conflicts, natural disasters, and challenges. The Galactic Empire had assumed that a species which spent so much time fighting itself would crumble when faced with an external enemy. What they hadn't understood was that this very struggle had forged humanity into something much tougher than they had anticipated. Earth's people knew how to endure, how to bend without breaking, and how to fight with everything they had when pushed to the brink. For the galactic soldiers who returned, the stories of the jungle battle became legend. It was spoken of in hushed tones among the ranks, a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating an enemy. The Empire's recruitment efforts faltered as word spread that their army, once thought unbeatable, could be outsmarted and outmaneuvered by a less advanced civilization. Fear began to creep into the minds of those tasked with future invasions. No one wanted to be the next to face Earth's special forces in the wilderness of their home planet. Back on Earth, however, the victory had little visible impact on daily life. The general population knew only the basic facts: that an alien force had been repelled, that Earth had survived. Few knew the details of the brutal jungle warfare that had taken place or the lives that had been lost in the process. To many, it seemed like an abstract victory, a win in a distant corner of the world that didn't directly touch their lives. But those who fought knew better. The special forces, while victorious, bore the scars of the battle, physically and mentally. They knew that Earth had won this time, but they also knew the cost. The jungle had been as much a threat to them as it had been to the enemy. They had learned to respect its dangers, even as they used it to their advantage. The victory was theirs, but it had come at a price. They were prepared for the next fight, whenever it would come, but they were under no illusions about how difficult it would be. For now, Earth stood as a symbol of resistance, a planet that had defied the odds and repelled a far superior force. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations took note. If Earth could defeat the Galactic Empire in such a decisive manner, perhaps they too could resist. The Empire's defeat emboldened others, sparking quiet rebellions and resistance movements in far-flung systems. Earth had become an unlikely beacon of hope, a symbol of what could be achieved when a species refused to surrender. Yet Earth's leaders remained vigilant. They knew the Empire would not let this defeat stand forever. The time they had bought would be used wisely, to strengthen their defenses, to prepare for the inevitable return of the Empire's forces. And when that time came, Earth would be ready, not as the underestimated and mocked planet they had been, but as a formidable force that had proven its worth on the battlefield. The jungle had taught both sides an invaluable lesson. For the Galactic Empire, it was a painful reminder that nature, in all its unpredictability, could not be conquered by technology alone. For Earth, it was a confirmation of something they had always known, that survival wasn't just about weapons or strategy, but about the ability to adapt, to endure, and to rise above even the greatest of challenges. The Galactic Empire's leadership, reeling from the unexpected defeat, was forced into reflection. What they had perceived as an insignificant battle on a backwater planet had now become a major strategic blunder. The Empire had long believed its superiority lay in technology, overwhelming numbers, and unchallenged firepower. But this defeat was different. It wasn't just a loss of soldiers or machines. It was a symbolic blow to their image of invincibility. As the stories of Earth's resilience spread throughout the galaxy, the Empire's high command scrambled to understand what had gone wrong. Their analysts pored over reports, trying to decipher how a technologically inferior planet had managed to humiliate one of the most advanced armies in the galaxy. They realized too late that they had made a critical error in underestimating not just Earth's forces, but the value of the terrain they fought on. The jungle, which they had dismissed as irrelevant, had been the perfect ally for Earth's soldiers, and the Empire's arrogance had cost them dearly. Back on Earth, the special forces returned to their normal lives, but the lessons of the jungle battle stayed with them. The victory had given Earth some breathing room, but they knew it was only temporary. The Empire would regroup, and when they came back, they would be more prepared. Earth's forces couldn't rely on the jungle to protect them forever. They had to evolve just as the enemy would. Plans were put in motion to fortify Earth's defenses, not just with conventional means but by expanding the guerrilla tactics that had proven so effective. The global leaders, briefed on the details of the battle, realized the importance of continuing to leverage Earth's unique advantages. Technology would never be the planet's primary strength against the Empire, but adaptability and resilience would be. The victory had shown that Earth could survive by outthinking and outmaneuvering their technologically superior enemies, but it also highlighted the need for deeper preparation. Training programs were expanded, focusing on tactics that maximized the use of Earth's diverse environments. Special forces teams, already experts in jungle warfare, began developing new strategies for deserts, mountains, and urban landscapes. Earth scientists, too, took notice of the battle's outcome. They saw the need to innovate in ways that could complement their soldiers' strengths. Rather than trying to match the Empire's technological advancements head-to-head, they focused on enhancing the human element, improving communication systems that could function in hostile environments, developing camouflage technology that would make soldiers even harder to detect, and creating weapons that were simple but devastatingly effective in specific terrains. It was clear that Earth's greatest weapon was not technology but its people and their ability to use their environment as a tool of war. Across the galaxy, the defeat on Earth sent shockwaves through the Empire's military. Soldiers who had once believed in the Empire's invincibility now questioned their leaders. Morale had plummeted, not just because of the defeat itself but because of how it had been delivered, by an enemy that wasn't supposed to pose a serious threat. Earth had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for other worlds that had long lived in fear of the Empire's might. If Earth could defy the Empire, perhaps others could too. Small insurgencies began to rise on distant planets, inspired by Earth's victory. The Empire's forces, already stretched thin by their vast conquests, found themselves facing new resistance on multiple fronts. Earth had given these oppressed civilizations a model of how to fight back, by using their environment, their knowledge, and their determination to wear down a stronger opponent. The ripple effects of the battle reached far beyond Earth, igniting a flame of rebellion that the Empire struggled to extinguish. As the Empire scrambled to regain control, Earth quietly strengthened its position. The Special Forces were sent on reconnaissance missions to assess potential future threats, and alliances were quietly forged with other planets that had begun to see Earth as a potential ally against the Empire. Earth's leaders understood that the battle in the jungle was only the beginning. The Empire would return, and when it did, it would be more ruthless, more prepared, and less forgiving. But now, Earth had an edge it didn't have before. The Empire no longer saw them as easy prey. The Galactic Empire, meanwhile, debated its next move. Some within the military command pushed for a full-scale invasion, to crush Earth once and for all and erase the humiliation of their defeat. Others, however, cautioned against underestimating Earth again. They argued that Earth's tactics had proven too unpredictable, too difficult to counter with brute force alone. A new strategy was needed, one that didn't rely solely on overwhelming numbers and firepower but that considered the terrain, the enemy's resilience, and their ability to use unconventional warfare to their advantage. The debate raged within the Empire's halls of power. How could they conquer a planet that had already defied their expectations? Some suggested sending spies to infiltrate Earth's military, to learn their secrets from within. Others proposed a blockade, cutting Earth off from any potential allies and starving them into submission. But no matter what strategy they considered, the one thing they all agreed on was that Earth could not be ignored. The planet that had once been seen as insignificant was now a threat, and threats had to be dealt with. For now, Earth remained free, but the battle for its future had only just begun. The jungle victory had bought time, time to prepare, time to regroup, and time to learn. Earth's Special Forces, having experienced the intensity of the battle firsthand, knew that the next fight would be even harder. The Empire would not make the same mistakes twice, and Earth would need every advantage it could muster. But there was a quiet confidence among those who had fought in the jungle. They had faced an overwhelming force and survived. They had turned the environment into a weapon, and they had outwitted one of the galaxy's greatest powers. The jungle had taught them not just how to fight, but how to think. It had shown them that technology, while powerful, was not infallible. And most importantly, it had proven that resilience, adaptability, and knowledge of one's terrain could turn the tide of any battle. Earth had shown the galaxy what it was capable of, and now the galaxy watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The Empire, humble but still dangerous, would return. But when they did, Earth would be ready, just as it had been in the jungle, ready to defy the odds once again.